And I want to say welcome to our audience that's here. It's beautiful to see you guys here. Thank you. All right, so here's our announcements. Our announcements are Clayton County Human Resources will be hosting a career fair on October 15th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Virginia Burton Gray Rec Center. That's the one located in Riverdale. Our Forest Park location will be hosting a cursive handwriting. So parents, if you want your kids to learn how to cursive handwrite, like I do, you can go to the Forest Park Library on October 9th from 3:30 to 5:30. Our Riverdale branch will be having a sensory story and play on October 10th from 10 a.m. to 11:55 a.m. That's a real different time, 11:55 a.m. That's 12. And for our senior citizens, the Clayton County Headquarters Library will be hosting an escape room on October 17th, 2025. We have 3 sessions, and it's going to be from 10 a.m. to 3. So you have to register, so call us in advance so we can put you on a list for whichever class you would like to attend. Now, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and take this over to our Deputy Director. Can we get a round of applause for Deputy Sherry Stanley? Woo! Hey, girl.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Coffee with the Librarian. We are so happy that you are here to join us in person as well as on our YouTube land. And so this show was created and started for residents so that we could introduce residents to resources and different initiatives and things happening within Clayton County. And so we have had a number of guests to share valuable information, but today we have a very special guest because we are shifting our focus now to the legislative side. So it's my honor to welcome State Representative Rhonda Burnough. Please, let's give her a round of applause. And she has played an essential role in shaping policies that impact our county, but also the state as a whole. And so we are very interested to hear her perspective on things. And so I will now talk and say, can you introduce yourself?
Good morning to the audience and to those online. I am State Representative Rhonda Burnough, District 77. So I represent the cities of Riverdale, College Park, and Forest Park in unincorporated areas. I serve on governmental affairs, higher education, tourism and economic development, and small business development.
And so how did you find your calling to civil service?
Well, my calling, so to speak, came from my parents. My parents always encouraged us that you should live and work where you go there, because that means that you have a voice. And so that was what was instilled in me. Now, in terms of running for office, that was not really something I was interested in the beginning.
So we're going to find out a little bit later what happened. And so how did your experience as a public school administrator shape your goals and initiatives as the founder of several community organizations? And how can people out there make a difference in the community?
When I first arrived here in Clayton County, I was at Terra Elementary School, and I was a 5th grade teacher. And from there, I went on to River's Edge and Kemp Elementary. I was a gifted teacher then. And so my experience at Kemp is kind of what changed my career with Clayton County Public Schools, because the principal then selected me to be a part of a group that was meeting with our then first African American superintendent, Dr. Joe Hairston. And so from there, a lot of individuals that were in that class with me went on to be superintendents of the school district. They worked as different directors. And so that was sort of the beginning of my introduction to going into leadership. And what really changed was when Dr. Pulliam came, and Dr. Pulliam is the first female and African-American superintendent. And Dr. Pulliam had a program called Day One. And so at that time we went, and that was my first time meeting her. And there were all kind of community leaders all around, from banking to ministers. And so what Day One started off to be is a program to help parents and the community understand the importance of the first day of school. And so at that time, that year we had 75 volunteers. We asked volunteers to come and greet the students as they enter school on the first day. And so by the time I was finished with that position, because it ended up going into a position as the first and only community relations liaison for the school district, by the time that ended, I had almost 1,200 volunteers on the first day.
Wow. Absolutely amazing. Absolutely.
So, and the other project was Celebrity Read. And we tied that in with Read Across America, but it was only for fourth graders. And so community leaders came in. And so from there, that's when I started to meet different members of our community, the chamber, our ministers association, and just different community leaders. And then from that part, one thing I realized was this year I did a road naming for our former chair, but because he was the first African-American police chief, Jeffrey Turner. And so that's when I realized how impactful the school district had been on my career in Clayton County. Even though I retired in, I think it was 2019, I can still go to the school district and get things that I need. So I attribute the school district to my success in Clayton County.
Excellent. And what I can hear from that is that you were out in the community. And so a lot of times you never know where you'll end up. But you started in the school, and that's amazing. That's amazing. And for those unfamiliar with the process, because we all kind of wonder, how are laws made? And how are they amended? What does that timeline look like? How are laws made?
Okay, so we know that everybody has watched different shows on TV, cartoons that talk about how laws were made. But down there, I serve in the House. And so what happens is a law can come from anybody. You could be sitting here and you may have a concern and you would come to me and tell me what your concern was and we would talk about it. And then possibly, then we would go through Ledge Council. And that's who writes up the laws based on what we're asking them to do, because they do the research to find out if that's something that already exists, is that something that can be amended. There's a difference between local legislation and then legislation that will affect the entire state. So for local legislation, what happens is that we host a meeting in which the people from the community and also our elected officials come and they tell us what it is they want us to work on. Now, there are some things that we can work on, and then there are other things that either require more time or they don't fit, they would not be a good fit in Georgia. And so then what happens, the same process is for both of them, that you go through Ledge Council and you talk to them. And then after that, once you have your bill, then you have to get people to sign it, because we get the bill and then you have to get people to sign it. Now, on some bills, you want different people, because we are state legislators, so you want different people to sign off on your bill from around the state, depending on if it's going to have a really major effect on a particular area. Sometimes, as Democrats, we may go make sure that there's a Republican on a bill, and then sometimes, you just ask your friends to sign on to it that have that same belief. Then once that's done, when we turn it into the clerk, and there's they call it a hopper. It's sitting there. It's like a little wooden box. And so what happens is then the bills, he reads them out loud to the speaker, and the speaker assigns them to a committee. Now, a lot of times your bill is just stuck there in the committee. It never comes out. You don't get a hearing. If it's a critical issue that has a lot of advocates for it, then you may get a hearing then. But a lot of times, sometimes, especially for us, sometimes we don't get those hearings. It just kind of depends. And so if you get a hearing, then it might go to the subcommittee. And the subcommittee would hear the bill, and then they would decide if they want to pass it out to the big committee. And then once it goes to the committee, then everybody's asking questions. Sometimes, depending if it's controversial one way or the other, there'll be speakers in the committee meetings, and they'll come and they'll ask questions. I have served on governmental affairs. And I have always been on elections except the past 2 years. And so if you know anything about elections, they're very controversial. And so I was also on the SB 202, that was the committee. It was called the Special Election Integrity Committee. So that was a big committee because people would come in and they'd have their opinions and they would be talking. And we sat for long hours listening to people talk about whatever their issues were. So through that process, I have been able to see how elections have changed, what happens when we get new machines, and how all that affects us. So then once it's in the committee, so if it gets out of the committee, then it goes to what's called the Rules Committee, and we have a rules chair. And so if the rules chair selects your bill, then you will present it, and then it goes to the speaker. The Speaker of the House is the person that's in charge of our legislation. And so if the speaker wants it to be heard, then you will go down to the well and you will talk about your bill and what it's going to do, and then it'll go for a vote. And so if it passes, then it'll go to the Senate. What we have, though, is after we're there 40 days. It's not 40 consecutive days. And so in the middle of the session, we have what's called crossover. And so crossover means that your bill, if your bill doesn't cross over from the House to the Senate or the Senate to the House, then basically your bill is dead for that period of time. We're in session, so when we go back on the second Monday in January, it'll be the second part of the biennial. So because this is going to be election year and it's a big election year, we probably won't hear a whole lot of controversial things. It's going to move pretty fast because everybody's got to get out and campaign. And so if it crosses over, then you start that same process again, where you've got to go to the committee, you've got to talk to the rules chair for the Senate, and you've got to figure out if they want to hear your bill or they don't. So even though right now we're capped at 10, we can have 10 pieces of legislation if you so choose to. And one thing is that everybody doesn't present legislation. So the one that I was successful on, that made it all the way to the rules chair was Gold Star Fathers. So there's a sign on by the Walgreens on 85. And so I had to go to the rules chair and ask him if he would hear my bill. And he had this little pen on, and I knew what the pen meant. So I said, "Oh, you're a Marine?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "My dad is a Marine, my husband is a Marine." And so what he said to me was, "We don't let Democrat bills out early." So that told me he was going to let it out, and he did. And so that bill passed, and so on November the 9th, it's Gold Star Fathers Day in the state of Georgia. So that's pretty much, it's a process. And like I said, different people can come to you, they can talk to you about legislation that they have. Sometimes it may be something that we can do, and then sometimes we kind of push it to the side and we kind of wait till maybe there's a need for it. So that's how it goes.
And so hearing all of that in recent years, there have been many bills regarding education and materials, such as the Senate Bill 74. This would allow librarians to be charged with a misdemeanor if books were deemed harmful. And the committee, which was SB, which is Senate Bill 278, which included and established the committee to review those books. And so how can people become more informed about bills like this? And how can we act as constituents, when it comes to bills that we want to have a voice?
Okay. So that bill actually did cross over. It came to my governmental affairs committee the first time. And that particular senator, when he presented that bill, he was very vulgar in his presentation because he wanted to make some point that these were horrible books and why would we do this? And so, we asked questions and things like that. But it didn't come up for a vote, and we never did anything with it. But it is very important for you to be actively engaged, because what happens is a lot of things that affect us are because we don't come down. And I realize everybody works, everybody has a job, but when we're in session, you can go online and you can look at different committees and you can see what's going on and you can at least be informed. But if I come to you and I say, or say for example, you come to me and you say you have this bill and it sounds really, really good, then you're gonna have to be an active member of this whole process, which means you're gonna have to have people come in and talk, speak about it, talk about it, because that's what moves the needle. And what I have found is, for Clayton County, is there are a lot of things that happen that I never hear from anybody. And so I've had to call and say, what do you think about this? And then, you know, they may respond, but sometimes by the time we respond, it's too late and it's afterwards. And then everybody wants to know what happened, why did that happen, how could that happen to me? Well, because number one, you're not a registered voter and you didn't vote. Number two, because you're not actively engaged. And that doesn't mean just contacting me, that means contacting those representatives and senators. Right now, I can't remember, there's one issue that I get a whole lot of emails about. It doesn't even have anything to do with me. Sometimes they come from different areas. If their representative doesn't, they'll send you something and they'll make it sound like it's really, really critical, but I'm not their representative. Now, that doesn't mean that if they had an issue and I thought, oh, okay, because there is a gentleman, I was on a piece of legislation for equal rights for men, especially fathers, and they wanted to be able to have equal rights in terms of visiting their kids, child support, all these things, and especially if it was a divorce involved. And so I signed on to a bill that was about that. So every so often he'll contact me and let me know, you know, what are we doing? You know, are we gonna do it again? Are we gonna push? So that was something of interest to me. So I didn't mind answering his questions because I think he either lives in Gwinnett or Cobb County. But we have to be involved. I know that it's very difficult, and we say, oh, I don't, you know, people say, oh, I don't watch the news, I don't do this. But all those things that you're not doing are having an effect on you. And so to say you're not going to be involved, I'm going to let somebody else, because if I think about the people, those people, probably a lot of those people that worked at Emory that lost their jobs, they didn't expect to lose their jobs. They're probably voters, they go in and vote, and then they go back home. They don't think anything else about it. But now they want to talk to us because now something has affected them. And so you need to be engaged all the time.
And we know that we have local Board of Commissioner meetings every first and third Tuesday at 6 o'clock. And so that's a way to start if you're not sure how to get involved. But with all of the talk about budgets, I saw a lot of constituents at the Board of Commissioners meetings, because when we talked about cutting budget, additional fundings, can you talk about the formation of a budget and what really goes into that and how it's distributed?
Well, the governor is in charge. He sets the budget and he decides, you know, what departments will get, and he looks at how many employees they have. It's just like doing a budget at your house. And so then there's some things that are priority. Who knows what the biggest part of our budget is? Does anybody know what the biggest part of our budget is?
They always say personnel.
No, it's education.
It's education.
Education gets the most of the money from the budget. And so what happens is, you know, based on how revenue comes in, all that has something to do with our budget. So when we go back in session, we go back to, like I said, the second Monday in January. So that first week, we're there the whole week. Then the second week is what we call King Week, because it's always in between the King holiday. So that Monday is the holiday. Then that Tuesday starts the budget process. So the different departments come in, they tell you what their budget is, they ask for whatever it is they need, and they do a whole presentation so you can know what's going on in their departments. Now, I'm not on appropriations, but I can go, but I have to find like Senator Davenport, or I'm trying to think of who in the House. I have to ask them to ask my question. Okay. So, like, I'll give you an example. I was there, and Dr. Toomey was the new director for DHS. I think that's the one that's in charge of our health department. And she said some disparaging things about Clayton County. And I was like, wait a minute. And so I couldn't get to Gail to get the question, so I walked out with her and I said, well, those are some horrible things that you're saying about us. And she was like, well, no, I didn't really mean it like that. And I said, well, all I know is what I heard, you know. And so anyway, Dr. Toomey and I are friends now. Well, we have an understanding, I'll say that, we're not friends. But because of that, because I did go and talk to her, then she started paying closer attention because I questioned her, because that's where I live at. So I can't just let you just say anything you want. And at the time, I don't think we had a health director. And so we really pressed her. So no, she was gonna combine us. Even though we're the 5th largest county, she was gonna combine us with some other counties, like Henry, and all of us would all be together. I said, no, Dr. Toomey, we can't be together. So I was the chair of the delegation at that time. And so we would get on these calls with her, and so she did get us a health director. But he was taking our money to LaGrange, and those are things you have to pay attention to. A lot of times people will use Clayton County's data to get the money or grant or whatever they want, but we don't benefit from it. And so we have to pay attention when people are taking our data and then they go someplace else. Well, so the health director at the time was taking our brand new equipment down to LaGrange and everything. So I was like, nah, Dr. Toomey, that's not gonna work for us. And so anyway, he ended up leaving. And so then we did get the last health director. Right now we don't have one. But I remember I was at a budget meeting and she said, she had a line item for our director, and she said, I know my friends in Clayton County are going to be happy, because she put the budget, the money in the budget for Clayton County to get a health director, to be able to pay, you know, a very good salary for them to come. So those are some of the things that go on at the budget meeting. And so then we have times, we have meetings where they'll come and when they come before the House, they'll present the budget to us. People will ask questions. Individual representatives can go and say, well, I would like this in the budget. Is there a way for me to get in there? So they'll go to our appropriations chair, and they'll have to maybe go to the Senate appropriation chair. So that's how things start to happen. But the budget, the governor is the main person.
Excellent. And with the current job market and the economy being what it is, along with some of the cuts to the budget like SNAP and Medicaid, what resources or programs are out there for assistance?
Somebody asked me that the other day. I'm not really sure how many process. I know that last year, the governor made a blanket statement and said that he was not going to fund any projects. So what they think are projects are things like SNAP benefits, things like your health care. And he said he wasn't giving any money to any of those things, and now he's not. And I think we have, maybe $10 to $15 billion in our rainy day fund. And he still has said, I think he's gonna be forced to put it in there only because things are gonna happen where he's gonna have to let some of that money, but he probably is gonna play around with that money. And there again, those are things that you have to call and say. Call the governor's office, call the lieutenant governor is one of the people that's running for governor. So they need to know if you need, that we need stuff and that it is important. Because a lot of things that, whereas we can sort of survive because we have different hospitals and places that we can go for different resources, those people down in rural Georgia, they don't have those same things. And so as we're fighting for ourselves, we're also fighting for them. And so we need to let the governor know, well, you're gonna have to have some programs now, because these people are gonna need that, because our current person in DC never said that they were gonna fund the states. And so all that money that we got during COVID and that we got during Biden, that money's gone. But Kemp kept a lot of that money. And so when he kind of does some things every so often, that's Biden-Harris money, that's not his money. Because he saved money. He didn't really fund projects necessarily the way that he should have. And so that's why I said you have to really pay attention to what's going on and what they're really doing with our money. That's why if you watch for certain businesses, they go further south or further north in some of their districts. But like there was one plant that they wanted to have in one of their districts, but they didn't have any water, so they couldn't have that. So, and we know we have water.
And with Clayton County growing and aiming to be a successful hub places for family, how can legislation help to prevent negative drawbacks resulting in gentrification, the high cost of living, and driving out Clayton County natives who may not have the funds to keep up?
Okay, I did ask. I don't think that we're at that point for gentrification. I mean, we have a lot of renters and things like that. But a lot of it is that we have, most of Clayton County's funding comes from our residents. And so we need viable businesses. And we don't have to give them we need businesses that come in and they don't have to have a major tax break. Businesses, or if they get a tax break, that is a time period on it, but not that we continue to suffer. And so we need, in order to have those resources and some of the things that we want, some of the businesses, we also, that's why the census is so important. And it's not till we're like, you know, we're asking people to sign, do all that, and then sort of like in the middle where you get close to that 5-year mark, everybody wants to know, why can't we have this or why don't we have that? Because what they do, a form of discrimination, is through the census. They look. Now, I think that we can fund those things because we go outside of our county to a lot of those places. We go out there and shop, we go for entertainment, and we spend our money other places, which means that we can sustain those places if they would come here. But when you're asking, like a business called me, and it's a gentleman, he wants to do a hotel. And one of the things I requested, I said, well, you're gonna need to be a member of our chamber. And he was like, oh, yeah, but he has not joined yet. But when they come here, they're coming, when I met with him, he wanted to ask me all the things he wanted. You know, he wanted us to cut down the land or to do this and to do that. But he's also been in business here in Clayton County. It's a business in Forest Park. Say he's been here 20 years, and he's never been active in that whole community all this time. But now he wants something bigger, so now he wants to see, now all of a sudden he wants to know, the opportunity zone. Well, yeah, but you've been here all this time and you've never invested in us. And so we have to get those businesses that are willing to come in, and they don't have to have a lot of big tax breaks so that we can start to make money. Because right now, houses are the homeowners are the biggest part of it.
And how are Georgia legislators preparing for next year's election when it comes to the spread of misinformation? And that's why we're here, so that our constituents can ask questions. Voters registration and access to transportation.
Okay, well, I see my friend Drew back there, and I will say that it's not my responsibility, okay? When you get information, you need to check for yourself. You know what the Bible says? Study and show yourself approved. When you see stuff, you need to show yourself approved and look and say, oh, is this true? So you talk to more than one person. You don't just talk to me, I tell you something, you go with it. You need to study to make sure you know what's going on. So sometimes you have to, like what I'm doing right now is I'm learning how to be a very good listener, because sometimes I will react if somebody says something that's really kind of off the wall. So I'm working on being a good listener, so I can hear what it is that people are saying. So the other day I was listening yesterday in a radio program. The person that was on the radio, and I plan on calling the station today to complain. The person that says, oh, Reverend so-and-so, this is not a good day for him because he molested somebody 40 years ago. And I don't think that he should go to jail on something he did 40 years ago because, he probably changed his life around. I'm like, no, but what about the victim? So the victim should not get justice. So therefore, what I'm going to do, because I thought that was crazy, I'm going to call that radio station and talk to that general manager about that. So when you hear something, you have to check for yourself. We can tell you things, but I still always want people to verify for themselves to know what's going on, because there is a lot of misinformation. And the biggest thing is, do not throw away your vote. Don't sit up and laugh, because that's how Trump got in the first time, because everybody laughed, they thought it was funny. Oh, I'm gonna do that because he's a celebrity or whatever else. And now no one's laughing. So you gotta take your vote very, very serious. And with this election coming up for governor, you gotta make sure you know who we're voting for. Because there's some of those people that are out there, they didn't do a lot for Clayton County. And Clayton County You know, we have a lot of people that come here because they know they can't win if they don't come here. But that doesn't mean that we're just so happy that they're here. You need to know something about them. And now is the time. They're all out there, their names are out there. You find out what they did and find out what they think of us. Because only we can protect ourselves to make sure that we're getting the best person for us.
And that makes sense. Everyone always says when you go to a doctor, get a second opinion. So we don't trust the first person or the first bit of information. We always make sure that we ourselves do the research. That makes perfect sense. Now, as we're talking about legislation, are you excited about some bills that are coming out or that are coming next year?
No, I don't think I'm excited. Because one thing's for sure, the Senate is going to be doing some things because there are like three of them, it's like 3 or 4 of them that are running for something statewide. So we will, like when that library bill came, we're going to have to really pay attention to them and pay attention to the bills that are coming. There's going to be a lot of jockeying. I don't think it's not going to be on our side, it's going to be on theirs, and they're going to have a lot of confusion. So we're just going to probably just kind of sit back and ride the wave because it's a lot of stuff that's going to go on.
And we have a lot of constituents that have spoken to me about wanting to start their political journey. And they just want to know, how do you get started? You know, if you are actively involved in your community, but beyond that, how do you get started if you're interested in politics?
If you're interested, you know, decide on what position you want to run for and make sure you know what it does. My mother was a school board member in Detroit, and one thing that used to annoy her when people ran for office was they would always talk about what they were going to do for the schools. Then she said then they should have ran for the school board. So I'm not in charge. I'm not in charge of the commissioners. I'm not in charge of the mayors. I'm not in charge of the city council people. I know my lane. My lane is the state. So I know what I'm supposed to do. Yes, I have relationships with them, but it's not my job to go and tell them what to do. So I don't really go to a lot of their meetings and things like that unless I have a reason to go. But I'm not their supervisor. So everybody has to know what they're doing. And I will admit, when I was first running, I can't remember what was going on. I think that's the time when the chair was wrong, yeah. And I remember I used to go and I would say, they would have forums and I would say, well, I'm running for state representative. And I had somebody tell me, oh no, we're only working with the local people. So I was like, okay. And it wasn't really until it resonated with me when I was looking at the Clayton News Daily and it had state up there. And then I reflected back and said, okay, so it's federal, state, county, and then local. And so then I realized my power that I have. So every so often, there are things that we can do as state representatives and we don't have to ask nobody. We can just change the charter or all kinds of stuff that we can do. And we don't have to go and ask the commissioners or the cities or whatever else. We don't do that. We have not done that since I've been in office, but it doesn't mean that we can't. And so you have to know, and then you have to be active in your community, and then you have to have, people sometimes have a tendency to be negative that live here, and you need to find out what's going on in your community. Like, for example, I was someplace and somebody said, well, I'm gonna bring in Boys and Girls Club. I said, we already have one. Oh, we do? Where's it at? Like they don't know how many rec centers we have. They don't know the senior centers we have. So you need to know about the place. And if you're gonna talk about it, have some solution. Don't spend your time, trying to beat us down about something. And one of my personal pet peeves is that I do not like when people call us Clayco. I think we're not a penitentiary. And so one day I was at an event and the person said, they were emceeing, and they said, hey, Clayco. And so when I got up to speak, I said, our county is Clayton County, we're not a penitentiary. And so that person that was with them, their media person, whatever, they said, oh, you shouldn't have said that to him like that. You should have called him to the side. No, he called us Clayco out. He said Clayco in front of the whole audience, so I just wanted to let him know what our name is. I mean, you know, like Atlanta has a song. I think that would be nice if we had our own song, but they call it the ATL. It doesn't sound as bad as Clayco to me personally. Clayco doesn't, it's just not a good look for us. And we want people to respect us. Because I'll tell you one little thing I saw. Okay, so one of the big things I have been fighting for is to get the money for the airport. Okay, so that $18 million from Delta was $48 million now. And it was so funny that last week when they were talking about the shutdown, I looked on 11 Alive and the reporter was at the airport, and on that little square said Clayton County. I said, now isn't there something here? I said, so now the airport's in Clayton County? I mean, it's always in Clayton County. But the fact that they identified us, and then little things, if you listen, that now they're saying that one of our congresspeople that represents Clayton County, that's why I said we have to know, she is now working with the mayor of Atlanta, who I like, he's a friend of mine, and they're gonna do things for the TSA workers, okay? But Alika should be up there with them, because the airport, a lot of those people that work there, they live in Clayton County. So she should have had a representative from Clayton County and a representative from Atlanta, because the majority of the airport is on the Delta side, is in Clayton County. So those are little things where you have to pay attention and say something to people, because you can't pick and choose when you're gonna put Clayton County on the news. So.
And so definitely we have to stay informed, and it starts at home. It starts with us individually. And so now is our portion of the segment to open up questions for anyone who has some questions.
Oh, another thing, make sure you all know the branches of government.
Okay, absolutely.
And who represents you. That's my other pet peeve. You gotta know who represents you. So, you can't, if I ask you, do you know your state representative? No. Let's see, do you know your state representative? Uh-huh. Okay. So I'm asking and I'm only doing this because I really need you all to go. I have it in my newsletter, on my voter page, and write down who represents you. So you know who represents you. I asked one man one time, he said, it's the man that's married to the Delta. Well, I'm a Delta. I knew who he was talking about, but that's not a good answer. In all seriousness, everybody needs to know who represents them.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
I've got a question. We're talking about the budget in the state, and in Clayton County, there's always talk about the sheriff and the funding of the sheriff. Well, it's my understanding the governor appoints the sheriff for Clayton County. So is there any way that the governor and the state can actually help Clayton County budget better and put more money toward the sheriff and the jail here, because so many of the people that do things that might get them arrested end up from the airport to Clayton County, and we're paying for it, but it's really, if the governor is over the sheriff, shouldn't the state help and put more money toward the funding of the Clayton County Jail?
Okay, first of all, the governor's not in charge of the sheriff. Sheriff is elected. And one thing I learned in the committee, they were coming in there and they were talking about it just went from me. But the only people who can remove the sheriff or do anything about the sheriff is the person that, I can't think of what their title is right now, but the ones that, like the CSI people, they're the only ones that have power. It'll come back to me, that have power with the sheriff. But the budget and everything that's going on with the sheriff, that's with the county. That's a county issue. Okay, so whatever he has not done or hasn't, his budget comes through them. Now, he is elected. He is what they would say kind of close to, you know, like a constitutional officer. But he's not, nobody's over the sheriff. So, and the governor's not gonna give us money for that.
I have another question over here.
Good morning. You said earlier a large portion of the budget goes towards education. I just noticed Georgia's not. It seems like Georgia is one.
So between 30 and 35 on the list of states as far as education, what are they doing with such a large budget that it can't be closer to 10? What is the slowdown?
Well, that's because we have a state superintendent, and that state superintendent does the curriculum. Plus, we have to, you know, they want to use a lot of the budget that that we have here. They wanted to go to like private schools and those kind of things. We have money, but it's not all the time invested the correct way.
Georgia always talking about they got a surplus. Georgia's, I think, the 5th largest military community. And 26 states have no tax on military pensions. With all this surplus they talking about, will you support no tax on military pensions instead of just the first $65,000?
Sure. But that's his playground with that surplus, you know. It's like it's the #1 state to do, we're the #1 state to do business, but we have the lowest wages. So a lot of stuff doesn't all pan out.
I have another question coming up.
Good morning, State Representative Burnough.
Good morning.
Drew Andrews. I just want to share with those here and those who are listening that today is the last day to register to vote if you're not already registered or if you have moved recently. Today is the last day to vote if you wish to vote November 4th of this year. And you can do that by going to the library or also online, my voter page. Just Google my voter page, Georgia, and it'll bring you up and it'll prompt you through how to properly register. Also, and I think great Representative Burnough would mention this, and I apologize if I step on your conversation, but we have an important election coming up,
Yes.
which is the Public Service Commission. And it's an opportunity for you to vote, especially if you pissed off with your utility bills. Let's see how pissed off you are if you serious to go vote. Early voting starts October 14th. All right, 14th through October 31st, and then election day, November 4th. So thank you for allowing me to mention that.
Yes, that is our, Drew is our Democratic Party chair here in Clayton County.
Time for one more question, anybody? No? Sound like it's a wrap.
All right, well, excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Coffee with the Librarian. You definitely have to come back. And what we have taken away is that it starts with us. So let's actively get involved. And also, what can we as the library system do? We're putting out the information. We did partner with the Board of Elections and having voters registration drives at all of our branches so that we could actively engage the community.
Well, I think what you're doing is excellent. You know, the more people know, the better informed they are. I was on a call, and that's one of the things that was said was that each of us, and you were asking about getting conflicting information, if we know the truth about something, to go ahead and say it and let people know ahead of time, even though they need to check for themselves, but let them know it's the coroner. They are the only person that can fire remove the sheriff. And I learned that in a committee meeting. I didn't know that either. But they're the only person there. The sheriff is independent. They don't have to report to anybody. Yep, they are. Because they're elected.
I always thought that the governor could step in and remove the sheriff if something really wrong is going on.
They may be able to do that. I'm not really sure. That sheriff is a whole different dynamic. And we can look around and see different things that have happened. I mean, and it would probably have to be pretty much egregious, because by the same token, when our former sheriff couldn't be the sheriff, that same governor did not appoint anybody in between. And so during that time, there were things that needed to be signed by the sheriff, and they, even though they went and asked for it, he deliberately did not put anybody in place. So, you know, governors can play games. You know, power is whatever they decide at that time.
Oh, sorry. Like, you say get more involved in your community. How do I start? Like, who do I contact? Go from there?
It depends. One of the most important places, you know, you can do things at your school. If you see, like Drew, he's always looking for people to volunteer. I know that's partisan, but if you want to be nonpartisan, you know, just look through Commissioner Hambrick. She has a really good newsletter. Well, and I take stuff out of hers too. But she lists different activities. We have Nicole Horn over here, the Director of Parks and Rec. She has opportunities. So it really just depends on what you're interested in. That's what I say. Find the thing that you're interested in, because, and then don't try to have too many things. You know, like find something that you really, really like, and then kind of get involved in that. You know, that will, that'll make the difference.
Any other questions before we wrap up?
I do have one. Understanding that you have an education background, what are the ways that we can better engage the next generation of voters to take the things that are going on in society and around the county or the state more seriously in a way that speaks to them? What would be your recommendation?
What I have found, because that's trial and error with them, is to find things that are important to them. You know, like I remember I was living in Houston then, and I remember this young man stopped me in Houston's parking lot and said, Houston's a restaurant, and said, "Who is FICA?" Because they sure are taking a lot of money out of my check. So you have to find those things where they are and explain to them, you know, how these things will benefit their life or how it will be harmful to them in the long run. That's what I find. And then you have to listen to them, because, you know, sometimes some of the things that they're talking about, you kind of looking like, oh, that's not right. But you don't give up on them. That's what, you know, you have to still come back and then find something else, a reason to go back and forth. And that's what I found with my nephew, was that I didn't talk to him as much, and then he made a decision that I didn't agree with. So the next time when it came up, I was having a whole lot of conversation with him. And so, you know, and it doesn't have to be long and involved, because they're not going to listen to you for a long time. But just, you know, whenever you can, you know, just kind of bring it up, throw it out there, and then just walk away. You know, as my youngest stepdaughter said, I used to give her a lot of advice as we were riding in the car, because she wasn't going to jump out. So.
I just wanted to add one thing. I'm Nicole Horn, the Parks and Recreation Director, to what State Representative Burnough said about the Clayco. Clayco is really, I agree with her, it's a culture. So when you're setting up and we're saying we're Clayco, it's like, what does that mean to you? And I think the biggest aha moment I had, unlike going to an event, is one of our youth commissioners, our past chairwoman, Miata Harris. We were having a meeting, we were talking about government, how government runs. They started attending Board of Commissioners meetings, understanding what a budget looked like. And she said, you know what, we're not Clayco, we're Clayton County, we're really about that business. I think when people refer to us as Clayco, it's kind of like, you know, we have rappers that are here, we're fun, we're not serious. But when you talk about Clayton County and the youth are buying into what we're doing as a county, it changes the narrative. So to Representative Burnough's point is, what do you want that narrative to be for Clayton County? Do you want to be Clayco or do you want to be Clayton County? And the kids really gave us an aha moment. And then to answer the young lady's questions, if you have any teens that are interested in government, high school students that are interested in government and how it runs, Sierra Dunn, who's the Office of Youth Services Administrator, is here as well. And she'll take kids through that process and introduce them to local government in some state, but mostly local government, so they can start early.
All right, excellent, excellent. Kim, do we have any questions online?
No, we do not.
All right, so this was a treat. We got a chance to hear about the legislative side. And so thank you so much for coming to Coffee with the Librarian. You will definitely have to come back. And so we are very excited. And so that ends our segment with Coffee with the Librarian. Thank you for everyone who joined us and who came out.